What's going on, friends? This is the Changelog. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time here, subscribe at changelog.fm. If this is your millionth time listening, hey, we love you. Thank you so much for tuning in all these years. If you haven't yet, check out Changelog Plus. That is our membership. You can skip the ads and support us directly. Check it out at changelog.com/plus. Today we are joined once again by the mad scientist himself, Feross Abukadije. You may know Feross from GS Party and other parts of the internet, but today we're talking with him about his newest project called Socket, the next big thing in the fight to secure and protect the open source supply chain. While working on the front lines of open source, Feross and team have witnessed firsthand how supply chain attacks have swept across the software community and have damaged the trust in open source. Socket turns the problem of securing open source software on its head and asks, what if we assume all open source software may be malicious? So they built a system that proactively detects indicators of compromised open source packages and brings that awareness to teams in real time. Today with Feross, we cover the whys, the hows, and what's next for this very ambitious and very much needed project. Big thanks to our friends and our partners at Fastly for having our back, our CDN back, that is, our pods, our assets, everything is fast globally. Fast is in their name, and that's what they do. Check them out at fastly.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Sentry. Build better software faster, diagnose, fix, and optimize the performance of your code. Over 1 million developers and 68,000 organizations already use Sentry. That number includes us. Here's the absolute easiest way to try Sentry right now. You don't have to do anything. Just go to try.sentry-demo.com. That is an open sandbox with data that refreshes every time you refresh or every 10 minutes, something like that. But long story short, that's the easiest way to try Sentry right now. No installation, no whatsoever. That dashboard is the exact dashboard we see every time we log into Sentry. And of course, our listeners get a deal. They get the team plan for free for 3 months. All you gotta do is go to sentry.io and use the code Changelog when you sign up. Again, sentry.io and use the code Changelog.
All right, we are joined by JS Party regular, the mad scientist himself. It's Feross. What's up, Feross? Thanks for joining us on the Changelog.
Hey guys, it's great to be here.
It is. It's good to have you here, Feross. I've been enjoying just, I guess, knowing you and paying attention to your mad science over the years.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. I love coming on Changelog and JS Party and sharing whatever I'm working on. I always launch my things by talking to you guys, it seems like.
It's a good way to do it.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, we like it. You like it. I think we met you all the way back in 2016, if this episode is to be believed, called Mad Science, WebTorrent, and WebRTC. That means we've known each other for, 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been fun being on JS Party. I don't remember when I joined, but yeah, whenever we do those episodes, it's always a good time, and there's always stuff to talk about in JavaScript. So
Totally.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a long time ago. 2016. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Changelog 227, which is also a 1980s, I think, TV show, 227.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that show.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
He's Googling furiously to confirm.
Yes, May 6th, well, no, it was a long time ago. It was a cool show. I watched that 1985 sitcom, 5 seasons.
It's called 227. What did that refer to? Was it referring to Feross's episode of the Changelog?
I think it was basically like, they say, follows the lives of a group of middle-class people living in an apartment building. So it's like...
Was that their apartment number? Was 227?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of personalities in there. It's cool.
Do you believe in numerology? The belief that numbers have,
Significant meanings?
Significant meanings, yeah.
Not sure how much I believe in it, but I believe it's a thing. What'd you say, John?
This episode is off to a great start.
I said I believed in it until I saw Lost. Because they had the 248 thing, and then it ended up meaning like nothing. I can't remember. I don't know. Lost. Right. It lost me. Good first 2 seasons, and then just like complete utter disappointment from then on out.
Well, there you go. Totally, it's true.
And now we're just lost in this conversation. So let's loop back to Feross.
Episode 227. Go check it out, though. Let's leave that there at least.
You mentioned that you come on and you talk to us about your creations. So we had a episode of JS Party about BitMidi back in the day. That was just you and I on that show. And then we also had you on JS Party way more recently. That was in July of last year, talking about Wormhole. Today we're here to talk about Socket, which grew out of Wormhole.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with Wormhole, just a brief explainer of what that is, what it does, why you built it, and then you can tell us the story of how this new thing came about.
Yeah, totally. So Wormhole is a project to help you send files securely with end-to-end encryption. So, it came out of our desire to build a file sending service that didn't need to see your files. Firefox actually had a thing called Firefox Send for a while. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And they shut it down, at some point in 2020. And so when we, wanted to do this, we realized we would just have to build our own version of it. And we kind of, at the time, we wanted to build it into kind of a bigger idea around end-to-end encrypting everything, like all the things like documents, notes, collaborative, things like chat. And we wanted to start with files because files are the easiest, they're static content. So why not start with that? And so we built out this thing and tried as much as we could to make it really, really secure. And we started off with a kind of a fork of the Firefox Send code base. And we were inspired by the encryption system that they used. And we added actually a bunch of improvements to it and additional web security features. So we did a bunch of things there's no third-party scripts in the site at all. We have a really strong content security policy to make sure that, if something gets in there, that we can block those kinds of cross-site scripting attacks and stuff like that. And we also added stuff around peer-to-peer to make it actually faster to send files. So we wanted to kind of really make the user experience really good with Wormhole as well. So we do this thing where you can actually start downloading a file before it's fully uploaded. So if the sender and the receiver are online at the same time, you don't actually have to wait for the file to fully upload. It'll actually the downloader will start to be able to stream it directly from your browser using WebRTC. So we did a whole bunch of cool things like that in Wormhole. It's a really cool project. It's online at wormhole.app. You can check it out.
And you can check out that episode for a long conversation about some of those cool tricks and hacks that y'all did. It was a JS Party episode, but it had Adam on it, so it has very much a changelog feel. That's episode 185.
Yeah.
Of JS Party. Nick Nisi also joined us on that one. So you're building Wormhole and doing cool stuff and very security conscious, conscientious, whichever word is correct, or both. And you said one of the security things that you wish you could have done better was vetting of your dependencies. And it seems like what you're up to now, in addition to Wormhole, or kind of this new thing that you're doing because of Wormhole or out of Wormhole, is a kind of a shift or a change or a new direction towards solving not just file encryption and sending problems, but this is every developer's problem on the internet now, which is the whole dependency, supply chain, security problem that nobody really has good answers for at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. I think everybody feels the pain around dealing with their dependencies. And that's definitely something we experienced when we were building Wormhole. There's so many dependencies in the average JavaScript application. The average dependency has 79 other transitive, dependencies. So you install one package, you get 79 other packages. That's the average on NPM right now, according to this paper that came out last year that analyzed the registry. And there's also 39 additional maintainers that you trust when you trust a single package. So it's a pretty large attack surface. And for the most part, it's fine. I mean, most maintainers are good, and the system mostly works. I mean, I'm a maintainer, and a lot of my friends are open source maintainers, and the NPM ecosystem is a wonderful place, and it's full of amazing packages, and it's really awesome. That everyone can just install this stuff and build apps really fast. It's the reason why open source is the reason why you can build an app with like 2 people, and that would have taken like teams and teams of people before to do. And so I'm not trying to me of all people, I wouldn't be complaining about open source. But when you're trying to build an app for like maximum security, you're faced with this kind of really difficult trade-off where really the safest thing to do on the one, like if you had to just pick the most impractical position you could have, it would be, we're going to read every line of code of our dependencies, and we're not going to use anything that we haven't vetted ourselves. And that's actually appropriate for some applications. Like if you're building, Signal, like the secure, end encrypted messaging app, like you probably want to know, they probably want to know everything that's in every single one of their dependencies, right? Big companies, Google, right? They're actually an example of this as well. They check in all their open source code into their own internal repository. They vendor it, and they consider it their own code. And they have a security team that actually vets it first, and they also vet updates. So if you want to update to a new version, the security team is actually involved in that process. They look at the diff, and they kind of decide when or if Google's going to apply that update. So it's a very manual process. Mm-hmm. But obviously for most teams, that's both of these approaches of like fully vetting a package is totally impractical, both because of like time and resources, but beyond that, even just like the skill to even understand all these various projects, it's like not necessarily the case that every team can even do that. I mean, part of the reason why you use dependencies is because you're trying to like stand on the shoulders of giants, and you don't want to be an expert in all the stuff that you're depending on. So to then require every single team out there to like fully understand every line of code of their dependencies is really asking a lot. But the thing is that if you don't do that, then there is a small chance that you're going to install a package which contains malware that is a package that's just been hijacked and that doesn't do what it says on the box anymore. And everyone's seeing more and more examples of this in the news. There was an incident like literally last January where a maintainer compromised his own package. And we did an episode about that on JS Party. I'm sure Jared's looking up the number right now. But
that's the Faker JS and the Colors JS.
Yeah.
I believe it's 211, but it might be 210. Still looking, but we'll get it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, that's one example, but there was, another example before that in November and another one in October of last year. This seems to happen nearly monthly now. In October and November, it was Koa, RC, and UA parser JS that were compromised. They had a Monero miner added to the package, as well as some malware that stole passwords on Windows from over 100 different programs on Windows, and also the Windows Credential Manager. So if you were unlucky enough to install one of those packages during the period where the bad version was on NPM, then you would be compromised. You'd have lost all your all your passwords. You'd need to reset everything and install your keys and everything like that. And UA parser JS is dependent upon by React Native. So like these packages had a lot of dependencies. Like they had each of those 3 I mentioned had 30 million downloads a month each. So we're talking like seriously popular packages that were compromised. Mm-hmm. The UA parser one, as an example, that one has 7 million downloads a week and has 3 million GitHub repos that depend on it.
Wow!
Just like that one project, 3 million GitHub repos. And the way that one was compromised was I believe the maintainer, their account password was just sort of like sold on a Russian hacking forum. So there's this post.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not like 100% certain that this is this is the cause of it. But 2 weeks before UA parser JS was compromised, there was a post on a notorious Russian hacking forum. So on October 5th was when the post was done, and then on October 22nd, 2021 was when UA parser was compromised. Yeah. And the post on the 5th said that so this guy was basically selling an NPM account with more than 7 million weekly downloads, which is a suspicious number because that's exactly the number that UA parser JS Andreas has. And it said there's no 2FA on the account, and I have the password. So that's enough for you to log in and change the email address. And they were selling this for $20,000 to the highest, to like the first bidder.
20K.
Yeah. 20K for
the keys to the kingdom.
Access to everyone's builds.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, if the commons keeps growing, which we want it to, right? Like you had just said, you can produce, some amazing software, if not a full-fledged company that could be worth billions with 2 people or less than 10. I think, who is it that, I'll have to look up my notes, but somebody is like super bullish on like with less than 10 people, you could build $1 billion company. And that's totally possible. I think it's challenging because that's a lot of revenue for 10 people to manage all accounts and whatnot, but I digress. The tech, sure. The company may be harder to actually run with 10 people.
I think WhatsApp famously did what they did with like less than 50 engineers. And that was, how long ago was that? WhatsApp's acquisition? Because that was $1 billion plus acquisition. Had to be 7, 8, 9 years ago. And that was 50 people, 50 engineers. So just, I think we could trend down towards 10, just adding some evidence to that statement,
And we're not going back.
Yeah, we're not going back, are we?
Well, okay, sustaining $1 billion company could be more challenging.
Sure.
The point being, though, is that you want the commons to grow, right? You want the commons to be there because it's obviously super valuable. And we're all humans. And so you can only harden security to a certain point before just somebody's 2FA is not enabled, their password is less secure, they get socially engineered somehow. I mean, it's the last 4 of their phone number. You get their phone number. I mean, just like there's just unique ways you can get into different things with people. So how do you really, since you can't solve for the human problem, you have to solve for it a different way. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth looking at kind of why is this becoming a problem now and why has it not been a problem up until now, to kind of get to kind of understand, like, maybe that gives us ideas of like how we need to solve this. And I think what's changed since, is kind of the way we write software. So, with the emergence of NPM and newer ecosystems, even Rust, I would include in this, the way that we write software has changed. So the number of dependencies that we have in an average application is just off the charts, and it's part of the reason why people always make fun of JavaScript and say that JavaScript programmers forgot how to program. They need to install a 5-line a 5-line package.
Their node modules is heavier than the universe and all that kind of jokes.
Exactly. So that whole thing is like, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to it doesn't seem ideal that we have so many trivial packages and that, the standard library is the way that it is in JavaScript. But on the other hand, in the aftermath of LeftPad, there were all these people posting, I can implement LeftPad in 1 line. Here it is. And almost every single one of those implementations had bugs. Like LeftPad, the actual LeftPad package actually did it correctly. And so even for something as trivial as that, like getting bug fixes and having the code be centralized in a package and having it improve over time actually has a lot of benefits. So I don't think we're going back even in that regard. But I think the other thing that's changed is, because of that, right? No one is reading the code because there's just too many dependencies, and no one is actually looking at what these packages do. And they're relying on tools like, these tools that look for vulnerabilities and sort of just calling it a day and saying, we installed, Dependabot or something like that. And so like we're safe, our open source is safe. But the thing is that a vulnerability scanner can only tell you so much about a package. It can only tell you if there's a known vulnerability. And a known vulnerability is something that a security researcher has found in a package. They found this problem, they've reported it to the maintainer, and they've published a CVE. And this tool can now tell you, okay, this particular version is vulnerable, and you should update to such and such version to get a fix. But that doesn't actually stop the type of attack we're talking about here, where a package is taken over by a maintainer and malware is inserted. That isn't going to be in a CVE database. That isn't going to be a vulnerability that is a known vulnerability. That is, by definition, an unexpected occurrence, right? So what you really need, in my opinion, is to actually look at the contents of the package to figure out what's inside the package. What is it doing? What capabilities is it using? Does it talk to the network? Does it read files on your file system? Does it run an install script, right? Was a new maintainer added recently to this package? That's the kind of thing that if you had that intelligence, then you could have caught all of the supply chain attacks of the last year.
You can catch outliers pretty early. You can, because if you had 2 new maintainers in the last month and it installs, it's a good candidate to check, to vet further.
Yeah.
Rather than the ones who don't, of course. Just for those who may be uninitiated, what's a CVE for us?
So a CVE is what does it even stand for?
Common vulnerabilities and exposures.
Yeah, it's basically a number that is assigned by this organization called MITRE. And when a security researcher finds a vulnerability in a software package, they report on that to the maintainer, and then they can get this sort of standardized number issued. And what's cool about that is it feeds into all this tooling. And so there's like a common way to refer to these vulnerabilities with a common identifier. And when tooling reports about it, there's like a thing you can look up and know what vulnerability exactly we're talking about, because there's so many, we need to like number them. And so this is kind of just like a central organization that coordinates this numbering. So it's also actually like a government effort. So the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and CISA, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, are the ones that run it. And all this goes into this thing called the NVD, or the National Vulnerability Database. So it's actually like a U.S. government effort. And that's the thing that all the different tooling basically just reports on right now. It's all like, and this is actually what NPM audit does. The thing that, that you see every time you run NPM install, and it tells you have, 10 packages with vulnerabilities. It's really just doing a lookup into this database and telling you how many CVEs are known for, for the versions you're installing.
What you're saying though is you can't simply rely on that. Like, it's a good practice, of course, right? But if it's the only line of defense, that's where you have a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think take like what we were doing with Wormhole, right? I mean, we were looking for this. I mean, we had Dependabot installed, and Dependabot will go ahead and send us a pull request if we have a vulnerability in our project, and we would update that and get that out as quickly as we could. And that's a great thing to do. But the thing we were specifically worried about was, the kind of attack that would target Wormhole specifically, or one of these supply chain attacks that would just start doing random things on our server, like mining cryptocurrency or talking to random servers. There was that ESLint scope bug that was another attack that happened where the malware actually stole your npm-rc file, and it could publish packages as you. And then there was, I could just, the list goes on, like the things that can go wrong with. So it's like you have this small probability of a really bad thing happening, because when you run npm install, you're basically just trusting that the code, is going to do what it says. And you're running this on your laptop, right? With like all your personal files, your photos, your all your documents, your social security number, all that stuff is on there, right? And then you're running it on your production server with all your user data. Now, in the case of Wormhole, we didn't store any user data, but our app needed to be secure to not, serve compromised JavaScript code down to our visitors. And so, that was our concern. That was what we were worried about. And, once Wormhole got popular and we started getting over 100,000 people using it every month, and we started looking at the really basic statistics that we gather about the users, we saw like a third of our visitors come from China, and they're using it to send files there securely. And so then I started to get pretty worried. I was like, well, we're not the biggest fish in the pond, but there is a chance that, we could be the target of state-sponsored attackers, who want to know what's going on in those files. And, so it seemed like a thing that we should at least have a plan for how we're going to deal with our dependencies and how we're going to vet these things. And when we looked around for tools for this, basically I didn't find anything. I mean, one option is, I guess you could check in your dependencies into your repo, and but then you're still not going to be vetting them, right? I think basically what everybody does is they just kind of hope for the best. They don't look at their code. But
this is what I call trust the system for us. I made this up a long time ago. I went to Jamaica with my wife. We got married in Jamaica. And this is actually when I coined the phrase, trust the system, babe, I said to her. And my sister-in-law, future sister-in-law, because we weren't married yet, hey, what are you doing with your bag? I just trust the system. It's a different country. It's not the USA. So things get handled differently. Not that you can't trust them, but there's just different things happen in different countries differently than they do here. And so, long story short, my sister-in-law did not have her bag. And thankfully, she checked one, because then she actually had clothes and she could actually go to our wedding and do all the fun things we had planned. But I came up with this term, trust the system. And that's what you do. When you npm install, you trust the system.
Yeah, but I like trust but verify better.
There you go.
Okay, trust but verify. Touche.
We also have Dependabot installed and have long been a user of intrusion detection systems in the past, and monitoring systems, and these are vulnerability scanners. And their technology solutions, ultimately, for me, they've come up short because of the noise, because of the false positives, because they're not smart enough to know that actually that vulnerable package never runs in a production context. It's like part of my build process, or there's 7 reasons from Sunday why it doesn't apply. And when I hear your solution of, well, what we need to do is like be looking for these other things, such as this project has 2 new maintainers. Well, that's an alert I'm going to ignore immediately, right? Because aren't we just adding more noise to the potential signal that we're trying to get out? Or maybe there's a different way that you're going about this that makes it special.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very sensitive to the noise issue, so I definitely wouldn't want to use a tool that added noise. And so that's definitely not what Socket's going to do. So we're being very careful with the types of things that we will alert you on. So if you install the GitHub app for Socket, it will currently just warn you about typo squatting, which is the number 1 supply chain attack happening right now on NPM.
Explain typo squatting real quick.
Yeah, so typo squatting is when somebody registers a package name that is 1 or 2 characters off from a popular package, and they hope that people will accidentally install the typoed version, the typoed name, and get the attacker's code. So think about, think of like something like, say like you registered the name, React, but you swap the location of the like R and the E, right? In the name React. And you just hope that like, I don't know, a couple hundred people are going to make that mistake and install that typoed version. And then once that runs, then, the attacker's code is in there and it can do whatever it wants. And we see that, like 60% of malware on NPM uses an install script. So that means that just you hitting enter on that is like enough to compromise you. So you're going to type npm install typoed version of React, right? You hit enter, and then even before you've like imported it or whatever, it runs code on your machine. And that's like the install script attack vector that you see most malware use. And then, what is it going to do? Of course, it can do whatever it wants at that point. But they're just hoping, like they're basically just kind of riding on this like popularity. The thing that's crazy is like there's so many of these that even like, I found, for example, there's this package called Browsers List. Have you heard of it before? You probably use it though. It's like it's this thing that lets you kind of define the browsers that you want to support in your application. So you can say like, I support IE 11, or oh God forbid, hopefully you don't have to support IE 11, but I support the last 2 versions of Chrome or whatever, and you can put this into a standardized file in your repo, and then all the different kind of tooling that you use can like refer to that file and use that for automatically generating polyfills and stuff like that. So all the different tools can rely on one place where you define the browsers that you support for your whole app. And anyway, it's a weird name, right? It's called Browsers List. And so I constantly make the typo. I type browser list, instead of browsers list. Yeah. It's a very easy typo to make. And if you look up that typoed package, you'll see that the oldest version that's been published in there is a security holding package from NPM, which is usually, you'll see that when a package used to be malware at some point, and then it got taken over, it got kind of removed, and then they put up a kind of a blank package to kind of hold the name so that bad guys can't register it in the future. So I don't know for sure whether that used to be malware in the past, but it seems like it may have been. And if you look at it now, the current owner of it has published a kind of a one-line package that just throws an exception and says, hey, you shouldn't install this. Like you really meant to install the other one, which is a nice service that they're providing to people. Mm-hmm. But if you look at that, it's still installed 700,000 times a year.
Wow.
The typoed version. And so like,
of course, yeah.
Yeah, there's no tool that's telling people that they're installing the wrong version and that this is a source of unnecessary risk. And so we found this and we looked at what packages were doing this, and we found, the popular Preact library was installing Browser List, the wrong package. So Preact was vulnerable. So we went, it wasn't, an actual vulnerability, but it was, it was this unnecessary dependency that could, is just adding risk for no benefit. And, we found other stuff like there's all kinds of like, Browserify, right? There's a typo called Bowserify. It's literally Browserify, but like with extra
for Nintendo,
for Nintendo fans, but also with extra code injected into your bundle.
Oh,
like that's all they added.
Sure. Why not?
A little bonus.
It's the same thing, but with extra code.
It's like a power up.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's doing. Maybe it's fine, but like it's just like these weird things out there. And remember, NPM is like kind of a wiki. Anyone can publish anything.
Sure.
So like, there's no guarantee that these random typos that only have like 100 downloads have ever been vetted by anybody. So you really don't want to run that stuff on your computer. So anyway, to answer your question, Jared, that's an example where if we were to tell you in a pull request, hey, you installed a typo. It appears that you installed a typo because we found this other package that's one letter different that has 1,000,000 times more downloads than the one you chose. And it just asks you to double check, like, hey, are you sure you meant to install this one and not this other one? Then we see that as like, that's probably not going to be a noisy alert. Like it's probably not going to happen that often. But if it even happens like once every 3 months that it catches a typo, like you're just really happy that it did that, right? You're not going to complain that this bot like warned you about this typo.
Yeah.
So like that's the kind of level of things we're trying to catch with the bot, and we don't want to anything like noisy. We're not going to include it. It's just not worth it.
Isn't there a thing too where when you read a sentence, you can remove the vowels, you can like rearrange the first and last letter? I'm totally making this up, but there's something that's like, you can read a full-on sentence that's totally jacked up from a character organizational standpoint. Like it doesn't have to be spelled correctly, and you can still read it because that's the way the human mind works. It completes itself, so to speak. And I don't know the exact study. If y'all know, then for sure share it. But while you were talking there about browsers list, plural, I Googled it and landed on browserslist.dev. And I was thinking, like, how do I even know if this is the right site? Because you could totally be the misspelled version of it and put a very similar site up. And it can look very good. It can look just like browsers list should be. And,
especially since the source code for browserslist.dev is probably open source on GitHub. You just copy theirs and make your changes and republish, and it looks almost like the real thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that makes this hard too is like that a lot of these names are, it's not clear. Like, there's like things like, blah, blah, blah dash proxy, or, blah, blah, blah dash proxied, right? It's like, what like tense of the word are you supposed to use? There's a lot of this kind of stuff that you see in these typo squatting attacks. Another common one is the JS suffix, right? Like, or in other ecosystems, there's the .py suffix. Like, is it called standard, or is it called standard JS? Well, it turns out both of those are available on NPM.
Oh, wow.
And if you install the wrong one, right, it's some random garbage that someone published, that it's nothing to do with the original project. And so, it's kind of and sometimes the JS version is the right one, and sometimes the one that's missing it is the right one. So it's hard to know a priori what's the correct one.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Square. Millions of Square sellers use the Square App Marketplace to discover and install apps they rely on daily to run their businesses. And the way you get your app there is by becoming a Square App partner. Let me tell you how this works. As a Square App partner, you can offer and monetize your apps directly to Square sellers in the app marketplace to millions of sellers. You can leverage the Square platform to build robust e-commerce websites, smart payment integrations, and custom solutions for millions of businesses. And here's the best part. You get to keep 100% of revenue while you grow. Square collects a 0% cut from your sales for the first year or your first 100 Square referred sellers. That way you can focus on building and growing your Square customer base, and you get to set your own pricing models. You also get a ton of support from Square. You get access to Square's technical team using Slack. You get insights into the performance of your app on the app marketplace. And of course, you get direct access to new product launches. And all this begins at changelog.com/square. Again, changelog.com/square.
So if we were to focus in on your typo squatting detection algorithms, are you using other heuristics besides download counts? Like, how do you decide, all right, we're going to go ahead and open that PR because we think this is a typo? There's probably some, you got to be putting some work into that whole aspect of it. Help us through the thought process.
Yeah, so for typo squatting, we basically say, okay, any package that has at least 50,000 downloads is probably not a typo. it's gotten popular enough that I think it's actually we're still tweaking it. So it could be 100,000. It could be some amount of weekly downloads where we say this package has reached a critical mass of people downloading it that we don't think that this is all typos, and so we're just gonna like not ever consider those to be typos. But then if the package is kind of less popular than that threshold, then we say, okay, does it have a name that's similar to any other name of a package in NPM? And we do this thing called Levenstein distance, which is an algorithm for basically just counting up the number of characters that have been added, removed, or replacements that have happened in a string. So it's like a way to sort of describe the distance between two strings. You can assign a number to it, like how far are these from each other. And so what we do is like, if the number is if it's too close, the distance is too close, then, and we set that, I think it depends on the length of the package. Like the longer the name, the more chances for typos there are. So we scale it, a little bit by the length of the package name. And then we also take into account common endings and things like, .js or .py or whatever, or swapping orders of things. Cause sometimes there's like a package called node canvas, but is it canvas node? So things like that, where you swap the order of words, we consider that to be, that's like one change, even though technically a ton of letters are moving around, we consider that to be like an easy mistake to make. So that's like a one letter or like a one cost change. And then once we do that and we figure out, okay, these are all the packages that have similar names, then we say, all right, are any of these 1,000 times more popular than the one that you installed? So it has to be, like vastly more popular. That's kind of the current algorithm we use. Now, we're still tweaking it and improving it, but that seems to kind of work so far, and it catches all the stuff that we know for sure are typos, and we're sort of just going with that and tweaking it as we kind of notice more cases that it triggers false positives or false negatives. But it seems to work pretty well right now, that approach.
How are you QAing that? You just doing a bunch of typos yourselves and trying to see how it works? Or do you have, I guess, is Socket being used by anybody where you start to get real human feedback like, this is not a typo, sorry. And you can work that into your sample set or what?
Yeah. We're working with design partners, so like early customers that are using this on their repos. So we have, a bunch of different people using it. Brave, Browser, Expo, that's the React Native tool, Replit, and Passfolio, and a couple of other ones that I can't mention. Let's say one of them is an end-to-end encrypted messaging app that you may have heard of.
That's not Wormhole.
It's not Wormhole, exactly.
I can put the message in a file and send the file, and now it's a messaging app. Boom.
Oh no, it's not Wormhole.
Yeah. You can't mention it, but it happens to be Wormhole. Yeah.
There are people that are using it, and so they're giving us feedback. I mean, it's a thing we're trying to improve and get feedback on because it is early. I mean, this is a new thing we built, and so we're just trying to see what people think of it and what the right, thresholds are for all this stuff.
And there's no tool out there that currently does this, right? Like looking at the author changes or the contributor changes, looking at typo squatting type scenarios where you have, 1,000 ways to do it. But obviously, I would imagine similar to maybe the way Richard Hill might answer it with SQLite, that their sweet spot really is their test suite. So SQLite is open source, but the test suite is not. Mm-hmm. So I'd imagine that over time, this test suite you have to test this algorithm for the typo squatting will probably be behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, right now we were testing this through spot checking it and through really, really basic tests, and then just like reports from users. But building out a super thorough test suite is definitely on our roadmap. The thing is, we don't want to ever block a developer. So, even in the worst case where you do get a false alert from this, like it's a comment on a GitHub PR. So it's not going to stop you from, the goal is not to stop developers from doing their jobs. It's the goal is to just give you information that can help you make a better decision. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to have a tool that stops them from doing their job and stops them from shipping code. We got to, keep things moving, got to move quickly. Nobody wants to install a tool that stops them from getting work done. So yeah, it's that's why it's important to keep the bot really high signal as well, because we don't want people to get annoyed with it and turn it off. So it's currently just stuff that's really high signal.
So typo squatting, I could see being high signal, low noise. Permissions creep is another thing you mentioned. New maintainers or new permissions on maintainers for a project. That's the one that I brought up as, to me, seems like I couldn't possibly care less until I do. So I'm curious, just the implementation of that one, right? Because that one seems like it's even more tenuous to get right.
Yeah. We have first of all, I should mention, we have a website that you can go to look up the results of the analyses that we have. So we have like 70 of these analyses on there. And you can see, exactly what they are. If you go to socket.dev and click on the issues tab at the top, you can see the list of things that we can find in packages. So we're actually running analysis of every NPM package that's published and looking for all these things. You can think of it like a linter, kind of like it's sort of just like hunting down these issues. And then when we find stuff, we put it onto the page for that package. And then separately, we have this GitHub app. And there's a question about like, what things do people want to know about while they're on GitHub? And so we don't necessarily take all the 70 things we find and put that into the app, because that would be a little too noisy. And so, this example you have about like a new maintainer isn't by itself an interesting thing. But if you combine that with, well, also it seems obfuscated code was added in this version, right? So maybe obfuscated code being added plus a new maintainer, right? Plus like eval being used. Maybe the three of those things rises to the level of like, this is noteworthy. And this version may require some further investigation. Right. And it kind of goes back to what Adam said earlier, where, you have a limited amount of time to spend on this kind of, on vetting your dependencies. Right now, people spend zero time on vetting their dependencies. Yeah. And then the big companies like Google spend like, ton of time and money vetting their dependencies. But for everyone else who's in between the two, or wants to do a little bit more than nothing, but doesn't want to quite go to like the level of Google, then having a tool that can point you to when a particular package has changed in a way that is suspicious and potentially malicious, so that you can spend your time vetting that one dependency and looking at the diff for that one update. That's a good use of time. And then you can ignore the rest. You can say the rest, no new maintainers, nothing interesting happened. The code isn't, it hasn't changed in any significant way. So what's the big deal? Let's just update, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. It's like, it's a balance. You gotta, for factors like adding a new maintainer are not by themselves suspicious enough, I think, to warrant most people's attention. Although, again, for certain projects, I could see them actually caring about that a lot. So this needs to be configurable.
Right.
So we're working on a .socket.yaml file that you can use to configure exactly what things you want to get alerted about. But we want to have like really sensible defaults for that.
So to give the listener an idea, if they're not going to socket.dev, if you search for a package that you use in any of your projects, it's pretty cool. It will give you the README for that project, as well as an overview of what it is. And then you all provide this kind of scoring system of 1 to 100 for supply chain security, how it rates for quality, maintenance, vulnerabilities, and licensing as well. I plugged in Umbrella.js, which we have on our site, which is like a lightweight, it's like a 3 kilobyte jQuery kind of thing for those who still like jQuery style DOM manipulation, but in a light sense. It has a 76 for supply chain security. Not great. Quality's high, 95. Maintenance is 50. I think it's probably kind of a done package, has one maintainer. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a place where you can start here if you're just vetting dependencies that you're considering, right? Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to use it in the GitHub app, alert me and open PRs kind of style. You can just use it as a source of information. I'm looking at left pad. Ooh, package is deprecated. Package has a non-OSI approved license. Package has not been updated in more than a year. So
yeah, you see the kind of alerts we find? So yeah, it's using apparently a WTFPL license.
Low score.
Yeah. A low score. It gives it a low license score, and that's a big red flag. And then yeah, it's also deprecated and hasn't been updated in more than a year. So those all show up as big alerts at the top of the page.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
There's a particular recipe for nefarious activity, and you're detecting, like Jared had said, he's like, well, I don't really care if a maintainer changed necessarily, but like you had said, Feross, if you combine that with a recipe of potential nefarious activity, then you do care.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
A license change, or as you'd mentioned, maybe there's more permissions this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the permissions one is really big. Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of the supply chain attacks, they go for, like you have a package like UA parser.js, which is literally a user agent string parser, right? It doesn't need the file system. It doesn't need to talk to the network, right? It's a self-contained package, right? And then suddenly this new version came out that was downloading an executable file and then running chmod to make it executable, right?
Wow.
That's a shell command, right? And then it runs the file, and then that talks to the network, right? So like you have all these things like shell, file system, and network that are in a user agent parser.
Right.
Like that's like a pretty dead giveaway that like something's changed here. Maybe don't update to this version quite so eagerly, you know? So that's the kind of thing we want to catch and highlight and draw people's attention to.
Let's maybe jump in the gun a bit, but how then do you scan all this open source? Like it must be an expensive activity. How do you do it? What's the process? Give us a walkthrough of how you pull down new code, pay attention to new code, pay attention to are you only paying attention to master or main? You know, is it simply a pull from GitHub? What's the mechanics?
Yeah, so we have a pipeline that can do analysis tasks, and we feed in NPM packages. And so, you know, we do this on every package published that happens on NPM. So we have a program that's tailing NPMs, following all the publishes in real time. And then whenever a new package is published, we download the tarball. You know, we save the data about it, the metadata, and then we then kick off our analysis job to kind of give us, basically to run all these tasks that we've basically written, like I said, about 70 of these analyses for a package. And so we kick that off, it runs, and usually it actually takes, we're actually quite efficient. Each one is taking us like 5 seconds or 10 seconds for a package. And then packages might have transitive dependencies. So we might be doing this on, however many things they depend on. We're going to have to analyze those as well, because we don't want to just analyze the top level package. That's going to miss anything nefarious that's added in a dependency of a dependency. So we run this on all of them, and then we save the result, and that's pretty much it. And we designed it in a way where we can also do this lazily. So we didn't need to sort of sit down and just kind of like crunch through in a batch job. We didn't need to like crunch through the entire registry. So we actually have the capability to wait until a user visits the page for a package or requests the score for a package, or does a lookup to actually then run that analysis. And so we can actually do it lazily if we need to. So we're doing that now in some cases for like the really, really not popular stuff. We're not gonna necessarily go and run an expensive analysis on all that stuff until someone looks it up, and then we'll do that in real time for that package. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've done it in a really cool way where we actually built it as we did our own custom pipeline system. So we didn't want to use something like Apache Spark or whatever, which requires you to use Java and is kind of slow and clunky and has a little bit of latency for running these jobs. We did it with our own JavaScript pipeline that we wrote, and it actually can cache the intermediate results of these analysis tasks so that like you can build a task that depends on other tasks. So say like you have one task is like download the code for this package, right? You can cache that forever once you've done it. There's no need to download that tarball again. It's not going to change. A version is immutable. And then you can have a package or a task above that takes in the tarball and then like untars it, right? And then you can cache that forever. And then you can have a task above that takes in the result of that and parses it into an AST, for the JavaScript, and then you can cache that. And so you can kind of construct these tasks can call into other tasks. But then when one subtask is done, and it may need to never be run again, right? Whereas like maybe the top level analysis we're doing, that actually might change more often. And so we can change that freely without having to worry about recomputing or redoing all the work below. If that makes sense, you can think of it like a tree structure, basically. So it's kind of nice, and then we can store these immutable blobs into a storage system that can store them forever. I don't know if that was too much information, but I think it's cool. It is cool. It's a cool advantage that we have with our design, and it like helps us run this stuff like lazily in real time and like not have it be too slow.
Mm-hmm. I'd imagine you want to do it lazily until. Like once people see Socket as a proactive security source, mm-hmm. you may not want to lean on lazily. So maybe while you're proving the model, startup mode, let's just say, that's okay. But like in the future, once you become the beacon of light for security, which I believe will happen because I believe in you, Feross, and I like what you're doing here. I think then maybe you throw lazily away because, mm-hmm. But then maybe that's more venture capital. Maybe it's, a larger user base. Maybe it's an acquisition. Who the heck knows? But, you're doing something that hasn't been done before, and that to me, like, I think the recipe for nefarious activity is uniquely done here. And the way you think about end-to-end security, and the way you think about certain bits is just unique. So I love the fact how you just like mapped it all out. That totally didn't make sense, but it also made lots of sense.
I didn't completely track you, but I'm also over here just typing in package names, trying to find out how good my stuff is. So
maybe my explanation wasn't very good.
No. I mean, I was half in and half out. So that's my excuse for not following. This is super cool. One thing I did notice is when you get to a package, it's socket.dev/npm/package. So as an information architecture nerd, I'm noticing there's like this npm subdirectory feel going on, and I'm hoping that means you have future plans to expand beyond the JavaScript and npm world and provide similar services for other ecosystems. Go, Rust, Ruby. Is that on the roadmap too?
Totally, yeah. I mean, the problem of supply chain attacks is not JavaScript specific. It happens in all the ecosystems. Mm-hmm. It's just that usually JavaScript experiences the problems that other ecosystems experience, but like a couple years earlier, because JavaScript is just like a little bit bigger and a little bit more chaotic, and it has a little bit fewer more beginners in it than other ecosystems because there's so many newbies always learning and joining, and so it ends up kind of hitting the breaking points a little bit sooner than other ecosystems. So that's kind of why we started there. Plus, I like JavaScript,
sure.
So I wanted to start there. But no, we're going to do all of them eventually. And honestly, Python and like Rust are kind of the top of my personal list. But there's a lot of people asking us already if they could use it for Java at work, or Go. So we'll see what we prioritize. I guess if you're interested in using this for a different language and you want to reach out and let me know which one you really want to see, we can maybe use that as an input to like decide what to prioritize. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I mean, this problem, I mean, a lot of the stuff around like the maintainer behavior, that stuff we can apply pretty directly to other ecosystems.
Right.
But the specific static analysis for each language is going to need to be kind of redone. So there's a little bit of work there, but we can do it.
Yeah, I imagine each new language will be a separate lift with some separate tooling and yeah, analyzing usually in tools and languages that support that given ecosystem. So we'll probably have a diverse set of skills or engineers by the time this thing is, worldwide and global. Yeah. We're gonna need. There's a lot of work to do. That's for sure. Are you up for that? I mean, that sounds like a huge undertaking. Yeah, but I think it meaningfully makes security better. I mean, I think that like, we need a mindset shift in the industry for how people think about their dependencies. Like, dependencies are not this magical thing that you can just show up and use as many as you want, and there's no downsides, and there's these magical. It's not this like infinite buffet of like open source that you can just take, and then there's no costs to it. Like, eventually you will pay a cost for it, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think that automatically looking for changes in a package that are nefarious is like a very low cost, no brainer thing to do to help with the problem. And so I don't think that there's really anything better than this that I could be working on to improve the security of the ecosystem. Yeah. I mean, like what else? Yeah, I just want to make a difference and make this stuff more secure. And I'm trying to think like what, I wish that we could all just like agree on like the best packages to use, and we could vet those and we could bless them and call them call them a standard library that we just use. But with 1.8 million packages on NPM and millions more on all these other languages, like it's just too much. We're not gonna ever be able to read it all. So we need tooling to help us.
Well, too, and when you involve a human in this scan analysis, it's fraught for error. It's going to happen. So like we said, with reading a certain sentence, you can read it without the vowels in it, and things that happen when an individual sits down and reads a bunch of code. It's too large of a undertaking to read today. The code was produced today, let alone tomorrow and the next day. It's just not going to happen from a human perspective. What I think is quite beautiful, though, is how this came out of Wormhole. Where you had this mission to be security minded, you vetted your packages or lack thereof, very, very aware of your security footprint. And to desire a tool like this and for it to not be in place, for you to then build it. And I don't know which one will be bigger. I mean, I have some bullish ideas about Wormhole itself. I'd love a better Dropbox. I love Dropbox. I think they're great, but I think that they've sort of gotten I don't even want to call them lazy by any means. I think there's a bunch of great people working there, so I don't want to like belittle their work by any means, but I feel like there could be some good directions for the product, and they kind of lost their way.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of end-to-end security and what you could do with Wormhole really impressed me and piqued my interest. But I'm wondering if, like, because of just simply the size of Snyk, for example, hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital raised, billion-dollar company, from when I last checked their valuation. I mean, that's the kind of potential that you have here with Socket. Is that, I think when Jared said, are you ready for that? Are you ready for that too? Because I mean, that's, if you keep going this direction, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for sure. I mean, I don't think Snyk solves this problem today. They just do vulnerabilities, and we need to actually look at what's inside the packages and go beyond that. So yeah, I mean, I would love for this to be the next Snyk. I think we're on the track to do that. I think if people want to be early adopters and use us in our current form, then we'll grow into a complete solution eventually that will compete with Snyk and do the job better. Right now, it's very focused on this thing that we do differently, that's uniquely differentiated. We actually analyze the package and look for these issues in the code of the dependency and tell you whether you need to worry about the dependency or not. So, but eventually, I think we'll grow into a full kind of thing and do all the stuff that a solution like Snyk does.
Sure.
But yeah, it's going to be a journey, for sure. And I think we want to keep we'll keep working on Wormhole as well. But I definitely think Socket, this security thing is actually a bigger solution, because it's a problem every company has.
Mm-hmm. The world at large.
The world has, yeah, and it's something that I feel like we're uniquely suited to do as open source maintainers and developers ourselves. Like it's like a rarer set of like understanding and kind of skills that it takes to build something like this well. I think a lot of like the tools that you see in this space are like made by these kind of outsiders that kind of come in like, oh, we're gonna tell everybody how to do security, and then they kind of impose this like top-down tool on everybody, on all the developers, and kind of tell them how it's gonna be, and like no one likes to use it, and it's annoying, and there's all these false alerts and stuff. And like we as maintainers ourselves building this kind of understand the burden of all this stuff, this tooling and these false reports and all this stuff. And we know what like developers want to use, like we're developers ourselves. And so I think we can really build something that's good here, and really meaningfully improves security for people.
Touch on that then. What's the adoption story? If someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, fine, Feross, I believe in you. I believe in what's going on here. And maybe it's just JavaScript at the current time point, so NPM packages. Mm-hmm. What's the adoption story? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, so Socket's super easy to use right now. You go to the website, you click install GitHub app, you select the organization or the repo you want to install it on. You click install, you're done. That's it. So it's really easy. There's no configuration files. I made standard JS, so I'm a fan of no configuration by default. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to get started. And once you install the GitHub app, it will monitor your package JSON file for changes, and any pull request that adds a dependency or updates a dependency, we'll analyze that. We'll figure out what exactly is changing, and we'll tell you in a comment on that pull request anything you need to know. Primarily, we're starting with these typo squats today, but we're adding more and more of the 70 detections that I mentioned earlier into the bot as we're confident that they're not going to be noisy. So we're starting with typo squats because those are rare and they're always important to see. And there's like never a case where you don't want to see that you may be installing a typo. But some of these other things we've talked about we're integrating those into the GitHub bot over time. So if you install this today, over the coming weeks, it will continue to grow and support more and more types of supply chain attacks that it can detect and stop. So that's kind of the plan there.
What about price point?
So it's totally free for open source repos, and then for private repos, it's also free right now. But I think eventually we're definitely charging for that, because that's sort of the model that a lot of these kind of tools use. Is if you have a private repo, we want to charge you for that. Mm-hmm. And so we want it to be like something that everybody can use and be affordable. I think we'll probably even do a thing where like if you have 5 users or less, then you just also get to use it for free, even if it's a private repo, just because we want like small teams to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're like a 30-person, you have like 30 people working on a private repo together, or hundreds or thousands or whatever, then you definitely will have to pay for it eventually. That's kind of the plan.
So business model pending, basically. There's some thoughts and inroads, but business model pending.
No, I mean, I think we like the model of, do you remember Travis CI? Everyone's kind of switched to GitHub Actions these days, but I really like this model of, free for open source and then paid for private, because it encourages people to open source stuff as much as they can, and it really charges the people who can kind of afford it, and it gives it away to the community. So, I really like that model for pricing, and I think that's kind of what we'd want to do.
It makes sense, because if you're going to be working on something privately, it's probably proprietary software that you're making money off of. And so you can pay some money to make some money. But if you're willing to open source it and let it be in the world, or if it's for other people as well as yourself, then it's open source already and it's free in that sense. So I think it scales alongside, usually the way people make money with software. So I think it's a good model.
Mm-hmm.
I think I should clarify pending then, because instead of pending out, I probably used still in the works, like still working out how it will actually play out in terms of the metrics and heuristics. It's mostly in place, but not so much pending. So I take that back. Thought through, but needs more. It's more work is happening.
Any active business is probably working on their pricing at all times, right? Like
I feel like early startups basically always change their pricing every like 3 to 6 months in the beginning, because they're just trying to figure it out. Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Retool. Retool is the low-code platform for developers to build internal tools. Some of the best teams out there trust Retool. Brex, Coinbase, Plaid, DoorDash, Legal Genius, Amazon, Allbirds, Peloton, and so many more. The developers at these teams trust Retool as the platform to build their internal tools, and that means you can too. It's free to try, so head to retool.com/changelog. Again, retool.com/changelog. And also by our friends at WorkOS. WorkOS is a platform that gives developers a set of building blocks for quickly adding enterprise-ready features to their applications. Add single sign-on with Okta, Azure, and more. Sync users from any SCIM directory. HRIS integration with Bamboo HR, Rippling, and more. Audit trails. Free Google and Microsoft OAuth. Free Magic Link sign-in. WorkOS is designed for developers and offers a single, elegant interface. It abstracts dozens of enterprise integrations. This means you're up and running 10 times faster, so you can focus on building unique features for users instead of debugging legacy protocols and fragmented IT systems. You get RESTful endpoints, JSON responses, normalized objects, real-time webhooks, a developer dashboard, framework native SDKs, and even if your team is not focused on enterprise right now, you can still leverage WorkOS so you're not turning enterprise away. Learn more and get started at workos.com. They have a single pay-as-you-grow pricing that scales with your usage and your needs. No credit card required. Again, workos.com. They also have an awesome podcast called Crossing the Enterprise Chasm, and that is hosted by Michael Greenwich, the founder of WorkOS. Check it out at workos.com/podcast.
So up until Wormhole, all of your projects, your entire life, have been open source projects. Wormhole was when you shifted strategies a little bit. We talked about that on JS Party. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming since Socket's a startup as well, that you're keeping this one closer to your chest, or is Socket going to be open source? What's the story with Socket itself?
Yeah, we're going to open source as much as we can of the application, but I think we need to have some part of this be like a server-side component, that because we're doing this analysis on, the full NPM data set, and it's like 15 terabytes of metadata. And in order to actually like look at the maintainer behavior and, figure out what's going on across like all this metadata, we need to do some of this on the server with like access to the full data set. And so we're going to make APIs for all this stuff and make it available, but there's just no way you could do that locally. So that's the kind of stuff that we, there's not really an easy way to like open source that and make it actually useful to people. But then there's other stuff that we can open source that, you can, analyses that you can run on like a package like locally, and we'll try to open source as much of that as we can. But yeah, for now it's primarily all this processing happening on the server side. And so it's just, it's an API we'll provide for free to people. But yeah, it's like the code is proprietary.
Are you hiring?
Yeah, definitely hiring. Yeah, we have a team of
always.
Yeah, we have a team of 5 right now. It's really cool. It's all open source maintainers. We have really like working with really cool people. It's awesome. Yeah, we have just different node maintainers that you might know: Mikola Lysenko, Brett Combs, Alex Moraes, who was a co-maintainer with me on WebTorrent, and then John Heisey, who also did WebTorrent and Browserify. So yeah, it's just like pretty cool crew. And yeah, I think collectively we have like 1 billion NPM downloads a month or something crazy like that. But NPM downloads are all inflated anyway. They're all just like CI bots.
CI bots. Yeah, pretty much.
But it
feels good.
It sounds good. Yeah, it feels cool. It feels cool, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's what JavaScript developers' badge of honor is their NPM downloads number.
Yeah. It's super funny how many of those are downloads from CI bots. That's probably like I would say it's like 100x inflated probably. What do you think? Or 1000x maybe? I
think 100x is fair. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 1,000, but I think 100 is definitely in the order of magnitude. 10x is not enough. 10x doesn't do it, but still.
Yeah, I think even if you just publish a package and no one downloads it, you automatically get like 500 downloads or like something just from like all the
NPM just hands them out like Oprah Winfrey. You get 500 downloads. You get downloads.
You get a download. You get a download. You get a download.
Just publish a package. You just get 500 downloads for free.
Yeah,
hilarious.
No, I mean part of that is us, right? Like we're downloading every package, so like we're adding to that number, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So our analysis engine. I mean, it's actually a lot of worker servers that are running now that are like chugging through all these packages. We're trying to do like what Adam said and preload, pre-process as much as possible so we can proactively catch issues.
Right.
And so we're still scaling that up right now, but so it's like right now it's hybrid. Some of it is pre-done and some of it is lazily.
So do you have a stash of cache that you're just burning through as you run these EC2 instances or whatever, wherever you're running your back end? Are you just spending money right now or what?
It's not too bad right now. We're spending, it's in the thousands of dollars per month on hosting, but yeah, it's not like it's not like totally going to bankrupt us in the short term.
Okay.
Could you futurecast for us a bit? What would
I was going to ask that.
What would happen? Let's see if our questions are the same then, Jared. So you can have your own futurecast if it's not.
Okay.
When you move from JavaScript to other ecosystems, what would happen to make you feel like you're going the right direction to take on Rust, Go, etc.?
Python.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what would happen between now and then? Like, so you've got some assurance that you're going the right direction. What would happen with the platform to make you feel like, okay, now is the right time to take on the next ecosystem? What would have happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd rather focus on doing one ecosystem super well and trying to like be the best at JavaScript before we go on and just try to do breadth for breadth's sake. You know what I mean? So I think like right now we're doing all this stuff in JavaScript that no one else is doing. We can catch all these issues. We're looking at all this stuff in a way that none of the other tools are. But I think there's even more we could do in JavaScript land. Like even before we move outwards to other languages. Like there's so many things you can do with like taint analysis and kind of analyzing data flows through these modules. There's a lot more kind of complicated analyses that you could do, and some of this stuff is really going to help unlock catching even more issues in the future.
Well, all software has licenses though, right? You have licenses, you have maintainers, you got certain things that are sort of like at large open source regardless of ecosystem, right? Maybe there's a way you can sort of carry a certain feature set for everyone, but maybe you go, deep on JavaScript, but like surface on a majority.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that is an overlap. I mean, a lot of the stuff around like repository health is reusable. So stuff like, is the package maintained? Does it have like a security policy? How are the maintainers doing? Are they active? Are they inactive? Kind of what's the health of this thing? Is it published by a trusted source? Is it a typo? Like that, all that stuff is like pretty reusable. That's for sure. Yeah, that's true.
That's why I asked that question, because like, I see this as being highly useful, and it does give me pause to hear you say you want to go deep on one particular ecosystem right now. But I can understand why. I can understand your desires for it. But that almost reminds me of like perfection versus progress kind of thing. So I feel like progress is sort of like a base layer for all open source, and perfection would be going deep on JavaScript. I could be wrong.
I guess what I mean is I want to make sure that it's useful to people before we move on and try to sort of boil the ocean. So
Sure.
it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to have the same feature set in all languages. Like, you're totally right. It's probably better to provide some value to people who write Python or Rust or whatever language, rather than just telling them, sorry, come back later. But I want to make sure that what we've shipped in JavaScript is really solid first. So that's kind of what I meant. Like, we're still taking feedback from people who are using it, and making sure that the signal to noise ratio is right, and that we're still adding these new detections to the GitHub bot. So we still have a little ways to go in JavaScript before we get into those other languages later this year.
I think if nothing else, it'll be a useful operational structure of your business as your engineering team grows to break out based on language support. And so at a certain point, you have all JavaScript devs now. And so at a certain point, you could easily say, well, here's our team that works on the NPM ecosystem. Here's our team that works on the Python ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Did you say that feature where you're detecting like, hey, this package now has IO that it didn't have, or now has network requests that it didn't have? Is that done and baked that's in there, or is that something you're working on?
That's something that we're working on for the GitHub app. So that's not quite ready yet.
Like the stuff like that, I don't think is going for perfection. I think that's going for like, this is how we are different than other people. Like, that's correct. Super high value. And I think that's like depth first versus breadth first, as opposed to, trying to make it perfect. So I think you're on the right track there, because I think the other stuff is nice and I like it, especially I really like just browsing the website and like just vetting different packages, because it just makes me feel smarter than I used to be, to be like, wow, now I know about this. It's kind of like when maybe your son or daughter, brings home a potential suitor, and you're thinking like, okay, what's up with this fella or this young woman? Maybe I'll ask their parents. Maybe I will run a background check. Maybe I'll see what their stance is on some things. Like, it just feels like you can just vet a package and have a better idea in an instant. Mm-hmm. It's super cool.
Yeah.
But I think that ongoing stuff where it's as long as it's not too noisy, of letting me know like, hey, you have this charting library in your package, and all of a sudden it's like calling to a third party. It didn't used to like yesterday, but now it does. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of stuff that really saves your tail. Yeah, and we found like surprising instances like that already. Like there's a package called Angular Calendar, which does it's a calendar widget for your website to pick a date, and it does like a bunch of stuff you wouldn't expect, like shell scripts, file system, network access, install scripts. And when I saw that, I was like, what is going on? This is a web component. Like, why does it need to like run some shell commands on my computer when I install it? And so I got really suspicious about it. And the cool thing is, when we find these alerts, we actually link you directly to the line inside the package that triggered it, so you can see what exactly it's doing. Was it legit? And it wasn't outright malicious, but it was definitely worth pointing out what it was doing. So it wasn't the best idea ever, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it
can reduce your trust in the package, really, more than the security issue.
I'm really conflicted about it, because it uses this thing, this dependency that does analytics for the maintainer to figure out who is using their package, and they're gathering kind of information about the environment that the package is running in, basic information about the
controversial take. We know Homebrew went through a big ordeal when they added that kind of a feature.
Exactly. So it's a useful feature for the maintainer.
Yeah.
But I would say it's a little bit invasive, and I could see how some people wouldn't want to do that, and so they would want to know there's like a way to opt out, or they kind of would want to know that the package may reach out to the network and do this kind of network request. So I would say our tool served its purpose. It pointed out this to us, and we could look at it and decide for ourselves if this calendar widget is something we want to use in our app or not. Mm-hmm. But I feel conflicted, because I also want maintainers to kind of get paid and to kind of know who's using their package, so they can know who to reach out to. And so it's one of these things where every company is going to want to make their own decision about do we allow this in our company? Do we want to allow packages to do telemetry or not? And so that's something actually down the line that I think we could support as an additional feature, is setting a policy for your organization. Like, do you allow packages to do telemetry? Do you allow packages to use install scripts or not, and like enforcing that, so that a random developer at your company can't necessarily go in and just add something that's against the policy of the company. So it's like a linter for your dependencies, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can I do my feature cast now?
Yeah. Was mine the same as yours, Jared, or what?
No, slightly different, so I'll ask it.
Okay.
So walk 5 years down the road, turn back and look. You got wormhole and you got socket. Which one's bigger? Which one's more successful?
I think socket.
Why?
Well, I think because it's enterprise software, it's just a lot more straightforward, like what to build next, because you have customers that are telling you what they want. And so I just think that's a really nice thing about building something for paying customers instead of for, I guess consumers can be paying, but it's a little different, when you're going for scale and you're going for mostly free users. So I think I have a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more confidence that Socket's going to be, the
big hit. So let's imagine a world where you're correct and Socket's a big hit. Does Wormhole just, you kill your darling? Does it go by the wayside? Do you open source it? What do you do in that world? Do you keep a team working on it for the love?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to keep working on it. I mean, like I said, it has hundreds of thousands of people using it every month. So there's no reason that we would shut it down. It's not that expensive to run because most of the data is peer-to-peer. We store the files for only 24 hours. The end-to-end encrypted files, we store them for 24 hours. So the data cost is pretty low. So there's no reason to not continue running it. So I mean, if we were to consider like shutting it down or whatever, we definitely open source it before we did that. And we might even open source it anyway, just proactively, because it's a thing, it's useful for people to be able to like run their own instance of it or whatever. Yeah. So we're thinking about it. I mean, it's just a matter of time. Like someone has to go and do that. And then there's the burden of like pull requests and issues. And then you got to run a community and stuff. So
yeah, totally.
That's kind of the other thing in the back of my mind is like, I don't necessarily want another thing to maintain.
The other part of open source.
What's about how much attention you can give to things happening in your life? That at some point you've got a certain amount of RAM to devote. And, focus is a superpower.
But by the way, the other thing I wanted to mention, if you're poking around the site, another thing you might want to look at is if you go to the footer, we have this cool page called Removed Packages. I don't know if you saw that.
I did. I tried to look at it.
Yeah, the UI is a little iffy on it, but what it does, it's really interesting. Is so remember how I said we save every package that's published to npm as soon as it's published. Well, what you can do if you do that is you can actually then see when npm takes down a package. It actually gives you a nice way to highlight like the sketchy packages. So you can just see what are they taking down, and then you've already saved a copy of it. And so if you poke through our site there, you can actually see examples of malicious packages that npm's taken down. So this is stuff that could have been reported by anybody, or maybe even they take it down proactively. But you just see the amount of stuff that's on there. It's like thousands of things. Some of it is spam. Some of it is malware. Some of it is pen testers. Some of it is just completely obfuscated blobs of code. It's like who knows what it does. Like it's just all kinds of. You can find all kinds of interesting stuff poking around through there. So yeah, if you're curious, it's really interesting to just click around and see what's in there.
I'm doing it right now. Sorry, I'm distracted looking at this feature. This is pretty cool. I mean, especially for people who are just curious what's going on. Airbnb-Fejax had a bunch of versions. Now they're all gone. It's like a package JSON and a distribution folder. And yeah, some real shady code in there, it looks like. Okay.
If you go into the dist folder, you can see what it's doing. And yeah, it's really sometimes you see these ones that have company names in their package names, and that's a dependency confusion attack. That's where that's where a company has their own internal npm packages that they publish to their own private npm registry inside their company. But then if they don't register that same name in the public registry, then an attacker can go and publish something there. And then if their tools aren't careful, they may accidentally install the public version instead of the private version. And so the attacker can use that to basically get code into the Airbnb app in this case. So I don't know if that's exactly what happened here, but usually these company name ones are something to do with that.
Yeah, this one is certainly some kind of a Ajax wrapper library that allows you to do some sort of Ajax calls. I don't see anything immediately that's like, oh, and now it's phoning home here or doing anything, but I'm also just scrolling through the code. So some of these things are harder to see, but yeah, definitely seems like it's attacking what is a real Airbnb library.
Oh, I mean, I already see the part where it phones home here. It's
Where is
kind of obfuscated. At the bottom of the file, there's this .fetch line, and you can see XML HTTP request. I don't know if you clicked the same version as me because there's multiple versions of this, but it's sending some data.
Yeah, I see a few fetch calls there. I do see the one in line 278, but now we're getting way deep into the weeds on this file.
Let me pull us out of the weeds a little bit then. So what you're doing with Socket is not prevention, it's awareness, right? Because I'm looking at like the post you share with us as part of your thesis for pitching this show to us, and it's like colors and faker, breaking thousands of apps, library hijacked to steal user passwords, crypto mining installed. So you're not going to prevent those things. You're going to make the open source users, the devs, aware of what's happening in their repos. You're not, at this point in time at least, preventing. That's NPM's job.
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously it is NPM's job. I'm not disagreeing with that part. No, but I think that NPM, historically hasn't been able to stop these things before they happen. So, all these attacks, October, November, January, the ones we've talked about,
sure,
they were all on NPM for hours before someone caught them and took them down. And if you look at research that was published last year, in various security conferences, they find the average malware is on NPM for like 300 days before it's taken down. So, for whatever reason, NPM is not taking this stuff down quickly. In some examples, they do take it down within hours if it's like a really big package and people find it and all this stuff. But there's so many instances where it lasts on NPM for a little bit longer than hours. And so I would love for them to be able to do this stuff faster, and I'd love to work with them. And if we find stuff, we're definitely reporting it to NPM and getting it taken down for everybody.
Sure.
But I think like there's definitely a space for Socket to actually prevent this stuff, because if you're getting a Dependabot pull request, let's say, right? Dependabot's trying to update you to some new version that just came out yesterday, right? It's very easy to look at that PR and say, okay, my tests pass, and the changelog looks pretty good. It looks like they fixed some bugs. Let me go ahead and just click merge, right? That's what I do. That's pretty much what I've always done, is I just kind of, hope for it's probably fine. Like the changelog looks good. The test pass. Just
trust the system.
Yeah, that's the system. Click the green button, right?
Sure.
And like what Socket could do in that instance is it could tell you, before you click that green button, there's a comment here we posted that says, hey, this package is now doing X, Y, or Z. And then, that might make you think twice before you click the button if it's something,
But that's still awareness, though.
Yeah.
Right? It still lives on NPM. That's what I mean by awareness. Because my original question before I even asked it, I answered it in my own head, which is, okay, if you've got this list of nefarious things that have happened out there, does a future with Socket in it prevent them?
Mm-hmm.
And my initial answer is probably no. Just know what you've described, what you're doing so far. It's more of an awareness to developers before they click the green button and integrate or install a package, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a prevention system. Like it's going to live on NPM. You're not preventing it from existing, but you may have tooling that NPM can use as prevention. But so far, your awareness.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I think we want to get to a place where we're actually sending our insights to them in real time so that they can take stuff down, and you don't have to use the Socket GitHub app to be protected. Mm-hmm. Because you are right that if we do flag something as being a suspicious update and we warn people, the next step is
broadcasting that
information, exactly. And maybe we don't want 20 different teams to all get the same comment that says, hey, maybe you should look at this update. Someone should just look at that update and say, oh no, this is actually bad, and then block it for everyone using the GitHub bot, and also get it taken down from NPM in parallel. So that's kind of where we need to go to, is to be able to not make everyone duplicate all this work. But in the meantime, obviously, we want to still give people the tools to see these suspicious updates and do something about them on their own. Mm-hmm. But there is an element, eventually we're going to want to not have everyone duplicating that work, and we're going to want to just kind of summarize it for them and say, yes, it's true that this package everyone uses, like React, is now doing this kind of a new thing, but we already looked at it and it's fine. And so for most people, they wouldn't want to. We could suppress that information and not bother them with it if it's something that we think is expected.
Yeah, I almost imagine a world where there's a future with you having a team that maybe does that on an ecosystem's behalf. Maybe 1, 3, 5, a small team. I'm not sure how big the team needs to be. I'm not trying to describe your company or how you should hire or grow. But I can imagine at some point these threats become so important to broadcast and to potentially prevent, where maybe now you're sort of in the awareness arena, but you could skew into the prevention and a more corporate prevention rather than just simply an individual team awareness piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where you can have that alert bubble up. Maybe it's to an internal team initially, and you have them do some of their sort of deeper analysis, things you don't want to, this is their noise to deal with that turns into signal for more people. So you can have sort of a higher signal threshold on a user basis because you've got an internal team kind of dealing with the noise potentially. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm excited for us. I'm always excited for your mad science activities.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you've got going on here, it definitely gives me hope. I think what you're doing here certainly gives us, I would say, a sound footing on open source. You know, if open source has one, which it has, and if open source enables, you know, two people to build, you know, a potentially $1 billion company, or in the future, the 10 people can do that. If that finally comes down to that number, you know, then open source is totally a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And securing that commons is a great endeavor. And I applaud you for doing it. I'm so glad that you've, you know, through all the iterations of your skill set and your career. I mean, I know you don't see yourself like that, and maybe you want to self-deprecate, but let me just say, I know Jared shares my feelings too, that we believe in you. We think you're awesome. And we think you're doing something cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited for Socket in the future. So don't stop. Keep going.
Yeah, you guys have always been the most supportive. So it means a lot to hear that, and you know, always get your encouragement and support on things. Yeah, I think that we're onto something special with this, and definitely want to help make the whole ecosystem more secure for everybody. And I think it's important for the future of open source too. You know, without if this stuff keeps accelerating as it has been, you know, I think that, you know, the trust will suffer, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna get to a situation that's untenable eventually. So better to be proactive about that and do what we can now.
Well, we talked about how many downloads there are per download, right? Like that order of magnitude. But think about how many vulnerabilities there are per vulnerability that we know about, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many exploits there are that we don't know about. And tools like Socket are going to help us know about those things faster, sooner, better. And I agree, it has to happen. It's getting more and more dangerous. The stakes are rising. $20,000 for an exploit that'll get you, that wasn't even an exploit, for a password.
Yeah.
That will get you the keys to the kingdom. I mean, serious money getting thrown around, state actors. It's never been more serious of a game. So I'm thankful we have you on our side, Feross. You're out there fighting the good fight for all of us. And I also hope you have lots of success with this.
I agree. Feross, it's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks guys. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor as always to be on your shows.
Thank you. That's it. This show's done. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, we got the mad scientist back. I always love hearing about Feross's big ideas. And more importantly, I'm excited about the future and the security of the open source supply chain. I think this is a very ambitious goal for Feross and the team there at Socket. And I, for one, am going to be paying close attention to this. If you have any thoughts, any feedback, any desires from Socket, Feross, others involved in this, please let us know in the comments. The link is in the show notes to discuss. And for our plus subscribers, number one, thank you. And number two, there is a bonus after this show. So if you see some extra content there, that is why. And for those not on the plus feed, check it out at changelog.com/plus. Skip the ads and support us directly. Again, changelog.com/plus. And last but not least, I want to thank our friends and partners at Fastly. They get our CDN back. You know them, you love them. We're fast because of them. Check them out at fastly.com. And Breakmaster Cylinder, those beats are banging. Thank you so much. Loving the new beats. Always, always, always. Breakmaster, you're awesome. Thank you. And that's it for this show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week.